So what is up, guys? Nick here, helping you to master your technology, how to use the iPhone 12's camera system. Now, this phone is going to be a smash hit. It already is. We do have the 12 Pro and 12 Pro Max that add an extra lens. I plan to cover the 12 Pro Max camera tutorial later on because that one does have a few more features in this phone, but we're going to begin with this iPhone 12. So let's talk about quickly the ways to access this camera because there's many ways to do it. So first of all, we know that you can just hit the camera button, but if you notice something, when I tap it, it doesn't really do anything. So you have to long press this camera, and I've actually seen people not know how to do this part. Well, you basically have to just long press that instead of just tapping it. You can't just tap it. It would appear that way, but you have to long press on this camera right here to get into the camera. Now, there's other ways to access this from the lock screen. You can swipe to the left, that will also bring you into the camera. And I think that's actually the fastest way to get into your iPhone 12's camera and start taking a photo. But there's two more ways. You can also swipe down from here. And if you have camera over here in your control center, you'll just tap it right there. And there's another way. You can hold the Siri button, take a picture, and you'll see it'll go into the camera. If you say take a selfie, it will flip to the front. So there are multiple ways that you can just quickly access the camera before you even open the phone, and I wanted to show you those first. But there is no quick launch feature, so if you try to double tap the power button, it's not going to do anything. This isn't a Samsung phone, so those ways of accessing it were the ways to get in. Now, also, I want to talk about, where you place the camera icon for your iPhone 12, because depending on where you put it, it might be less comfortable for you. So if you're that person who doesn't like to reach up, make sure you keep it pretty low. I think it comes default up there in the right corner, and then the music is in the dock, but you might want to place it down here on the dock. It's very easy to access it from the home screen. If it's down here on the right part of the dock, if you're a lefty, you hold your phone in your left a lot, it might be nice over here for you depending. So definitely think about placement if you don't want to miss a shot when you're out and about and you're just holding your phone in your hand. It could make or break or just make you miss a photo. Okay, so when we head into the camera software itself, there's a lot going on here. It looks simple, just take a photo, but there's so much going on in this camera. But we have to go to settings to discover what this camera has to offer in terms of features, and that's what we're going to go through now. So in the settings, you can scroll down to where under health photos and there's camera, or you can just kind of swipe from the top here, go to camera right here, and you could just tap on camera there. Now let's go through these settings so you can kind of understand everything that this does entail. So the formats are going to be like the way you save your photos to the phone and things like that. So the high efficiency mode does reduce the file sizes. And if you go to most compatible, so say you're taking a video and you just can't get it on your Windows PC, or you can't get it on a computer that's not a Mac, you might want to put it on most compatible. But for the most part, if you're using mostly Apple products, leave this thing in high efficiency mode. It will save you space on your phone. And this is really crucial for people using a 64 gigabyte iPhone or an iPhone just smaller in storage size. Now, heading over to record video, it's pretty self-explanatory. We do have our different frames per second, and they do have multiple ways you can do video here. So 720 is really low. 30 FPS is pretty standard. So if you see 30 FPS, that's a pretty standard looking video. If you want that ultra smooth frame rate though, you might want to go to 60 FPS. I actually shoot this video in 1080 60 FPS. I also like to shoot sometimes in 4K 60 FPS. So 60 is where I like it. It makes smooth motion. So you can see my fingers are nice and smooth right here during the video. Now, if you're going for that more cinematic look, you might want to go to 4K 24. So if you like that movie look, definitely want to do 4K 24. But keep in mind, down here, they are letting you know how much sizes that these videos do take. And as you go up, logically, you will go up in the storage size of each video. So every one of these will increase as you go up. Now, HDR video is key because this is a new feature in the iPhone. It doesn't work in every single type of video recording format. On the iPhone 12, it only works in 30 FPS. But turn this off if you're going to be editing on a computer that doesn't support HDR, like the editing you're using, the software you're using, or if you just don't know how to edit in HDR, because you're gonna have some blown out video and you're gonna be like, why does it look like this? But if you are just shooting for your iPhone, you might want to leave it on, and I'll show you how that does work really quickly. So here in the camera itself, if we go over to video, and you'll see in HD 30, it's definitely in the HDR format. You can see how bright that got. Now if we go to 60, you'll see it get dimmer. This is more of the regular video right here, and again, I'll go back to the 30 and you'll see it goes in HDR. So do keep in mind, if you do have that feature on, make sure that you know how to edit with it if you're going to be editing with it. If not, if you just want the iPhone video the classic way without HDR footage, you can just go ahead and toggle that off. Now the next one is auto FPS and formats, and you can see it will automatically reduce the frame rate to improve low light video and optimize size. You can basically put in auto 30 FPS or auto 30 and 60 FPS. It's pretty self-explanatory with that one. And over here you can lock the camera, so basically the phone doesn't switch cameras while you're doing video recording. You don't want that happening, because it could happen with how responsive the touchscreens are on these iPhones. So that was a big section to keep in mind. Recording video, record slow-mo. So they haven't really changed this much. You've been able to do slow-mo for a while. You can see it definitely increases by a lot if you go to 240 FPS, but essentially what this is doing is increasing the frame rate so you can make a really slow motion video on your iPhone. And stereo sound. So do you want this on? Well, it depends on if you want all of the sound in your environment. If you want more of mono audio, like you don't want a lot of background noise, you want more audio that's close to your mouth, like closer to you right here, you might want to toggle that off. But if you like a loud sound coming from your iPhone, you want crispy audio and there's not a lot of noise going on in the background, and you just want to hear your voice really well, I would leave that feature on. But stereo sound is known to pick up background noise, so do keep that in mind. Just test it out for yourself. Turn it on, make a video, turn it off, make a video. You'll see the difference. The audio get a lot more quiet when you are speaking when doing a video. Now over here in preserve settings, we do have different ways you can preserve it. So with the camera mode, like if you wanted to just stay where it was in the camera, like if you were doing video or if you're doing a photo, you want it to stay there, turn that on. I like to just set it back to default because I sometimes switch it up, but you might want to leave that on if you are doing that. Now the creative controls will be like your last use filter. So if we are in the camera and I go over here and I'm like, you know what, I want to do a vivid right here. If I put this mode on, it'll leave the filter on. Also, if I go back here into camera and I go to aspect ratio and I want a 16:9 photo because maybe I'm doing a thumbnail or maybe I'm doing something where it requires that aspect and I want to leave it there because I know I'm going to be taking more photos like that, then I will toggle this feature on. An exposure adjustment, similar to what we just talked about with creative controls, that's going to lie in here within our exposure adjustments right here. So if you had it brighter and you don't want it to go back down to dark and you just want to leave it where it was, you're going to want to preserve that setting right there. And live photo, this one definitely, if you don't like live photo being turned on all the time and you want to preserve it, you want to turn that off, and then you want to preserve it because you're tired of live photos going off every time you take a photo, go ahead and enable that setting. So that's preserve settings for the iPhone. Now you can use the volume to burst, although I don't have this on because I feel like if you're accidentally pressing the volume button, it's going to burst without you wanting it to. So you can do that. And then scan QR code. So if you do bring in a QR code and you buy a product on Amazon, it's like scan this code to go watch our video or something like that. It will show QR code and it will scan for it, so it can take you right to the website so you can watch that video, how to put your screen protector on or how to do whatever it's instructing you to do. So that's when QR codes can come into place quite a bit. That's just a little example. And then down here is the grid line. So if you want to get pro with it, you want to make your iPhone more lined up with the photos, you can kind of see the grid lines right here. You can do the rules of thirds, make sure things are framed up. I usually leave the grid lines on. I turned it off for the start of this video, but grid lines are always on for me, and that's because I like to line up my photos and make sure things are properly in the rules of thirds. So definitely leave those on if you're trying to get professional with your iPhone camera. And then you can mirror the front camera here as well in composition. And you can also view photos outside of the frame. So if there's extra information on the photo, you can go ahead and grab it. It will show it in the camera application itself. So you might want to leave that on if you're framing a lot of your photos and you want to get a little bit more information. And then over here in scene detection, it can automatically improve photos by using intelligent image recognition. So I leave this stuff on because I want the iPhone to be as automatic as I can. Like, just let it do what it does, because usually it does what it does very well. You don't really need to do a lot of work. So I leave that stuff on. So the next one is prioritize faster shooting. So it's going to intelligently adapt to the image quality by rapidly pressing the shutter. So making sure that all that stuff stays nice and crispy if you're taking really fast photos. That's important, so leave that on. And then lens correction. So correct the lens distortion on the front and ultra wide camera. So if we are in the front facing camera, right here. It's definitely going to make sure there's no, fish eyeing or anything going on the edges. Make sure everything is nice and crispy. And one thing I noticed about these newer iPhones is that they just take better photos. Definitely when it comes to no distortion on the edges, they've gotten better at that. And the wide angle. This is one of the most smooth looking wide angle cameras in the business. No distortion whatsoever. Very, very well when it comes to matching up. It does very well when it comes to matching up to the regular camera. So I would say keep those features on. And the Smart HDR automatically adjusts high dynamic range. If you want to like get more raw with your photos and you want to do all your own editing and blending and all that stuff on your own with different tools and photo editing, you might want to turn Smart HDR off. But again, if you're the type of person who likes to just open up that camera and you want the perfect shot, you want it to do its own adjustments, and you just want to post stuff, definitely leave that stuff on, because that's kind of that's what it's there for. So it just kind of makes the photo looks amazing by itself without you doing anything yourself. The iPhone's all about being easy. So definitely want to leave that on. So that's basically all the camera settings you need to know. They're pretty simple, but there's quite a few of them. That's why we went through that first. Okay guys, so now we discussed how to get into this camera multiple ways, everything in the settings. Let's discuss the camera software itself. So we are in the camera, and of course, to go left, you'll get through video, slow motion, time lapse. In addition, going right will get you to portrait, panoramic mode. But keep in mind, you could also tap these. You probably know this already as well, but I just want to make sure that you know that if you don't. Now, also, when you tap this, you'll go wide angle. Some people don't know that you don't have to do this to zoom in, though. You can pinch to zoom, but you can also hold this and go through like so. So this only goes 5x. This is not the best zooming iPhone, but you can hold this down and scroll through to the exact point in which you want that wide angle photo to be at. So if you don't want 0.5, that's too wide, you want to go 0.9, 0.7, you can do this. If you don't want it 1x only, you want to go 2x, you can do it. If you want to go 2.3 or 2.4, you can do it. So I just wanted to point that out if you didn't know this. Now also, you can swipe up here from photos and get to, different settings right here, or you can also just tap that arrow up there. Now you can do flash, auto, on, off. Here's one of the great things is the aspect ratios. You can do square, which is kind of like for Instagram photos, internet photos. You can do 4:3, which is kind of the best quality. And then 16:9, so if you're doing a YouTube thumbnail or you just need a wider photo, definitely 16:9 will fill more of the screen on this phone. And that was a major introduction to iPhone. Didn't really have that option before. I was always shooting in this 4:3, 3:4. So you can see right here, if we come out of here, you can go to the exposure settings, and if you get stuck in these, all you have to do is tap that setting to go back to the original, settings page right there. So you can tweak the exposure right here. And again, remember in the preserve settings, if we lock that exposure, it'll stay there if you preserve that setting. So you can hold that exposure there. You do have a timer down here at the bottom. I like how Apple brought everything down because our thumbs are resting naturally down here, so it's more intuitive than having it up at the top. Now we do have filters here. You have vivid, vivid, warm, cool, dramatic. There's plenty of them to go through. They're pretty much the stuff you would expect. So that's basically the photo section of the iPhone. And then when you go ahead and take a photo, if you hold down, it no longer does the burst like it used to back in the day. It'll go right to video. It'll just start doing a quick take video. You can bring it over to the right to lock it, and then you can take photos while in the video. Now it won't flash, but if you feel a little vibration haptic, it will be taking those photos in the background. Now to get to the burst, you're not going to hold down the camera. What you're going to do is just quickly slide it to the left, and then boom, you'll see it'll just start bursting at rapid speeds down there at the bottom. So that's essentially the photo section of it. I think the most important thing to remember is that you can really tweak that zoom, and also you can really get to settings really easily by just swiping up down here on the photo setting, or anywhere in the middle of the camera, or up there at the top. So those are the things that are really going to make a key difference. This does let you know where you're sitting at in exposure, and that lets you know if the flash is on up there at the top of that camera. So do keep that in mind. That's the photo section. Okay guys, so let's go ahead now and take it over to video. We talked about how you can easily tweak the settings up here. And remember, if it's looking brighter and then you go over here to 60 and it looks darker, that's because you have HDR enabled for 30 FPS. Keep that in mind. Again, if you're just leaving the videos on the phone, I don't think it's going to be a problem leaving it on. But again, with the video, you can also punch out wide, and you can do the same thing you could do in photo. We're not going to go over that a lot again, but you can. Now up here on the top, instead of having that little arrow, it will show you your video settings, but you can still swipe up to check your exposure. You can drop that exposure if it's too bright, but definitely it's really bright in the HDR, so keep in mind that's because HDR is on. I just want to keep stressing that so you don't forget this when you get this phone. Now that's pretty much it when you swipe up. If you tap this down here, it's going to flip to the front facing camera. It's dead simple with the video. So that's about it in video. If you do hold down the video, you can lock the video like this, just like you did before, and do a quick take in camera in the photo settings. So you can definitely do that same thing there. But other than that, that's it in video. It's very simple. It's more about setting up your settings right to make sure you're getting the proper video. Now, again, this zoom, this wide angle, it does apply here in slow motion, but in slow motion, you can't go ultra wide. You can only go 1x at 26 millimeters and up to 3x. So slow motion doesn't apply to the ultra wide angle. Keep this in mind. You can also switch between 120 and 240 up here, just like in video settings for slow motion. And in time lapse, if we swipe up here, you'll be able to adjust exposure, go to the front facing camera. And again, as we tweak that exposure here in time lapse, it'll show up there where we're at in the left corner. And that's about it. I mean, the video section is very simple on the iPhone. So let's go over here and swipe over to portrait mode, where we do see more things like natural light, studio light, contour light, stage light mono, and high key light mono. So when you start getting over here to stage light mono, this is when you start seeing more black and white going on. But you can hold this down and kind of go through these. It's more of a thing where you're just going to play around and see which kind of photo you're actually going for. They're pretty self-explanatory. Just go ahead and swipe through them and see which one you're going to go for. Now, if we go ahead and swipe up, within the portrait modes, you do have the ability to adjust exposure. You do have a timer, of course, and you do have filters. So it depends on which mode you're in, where you're going to get different features. Now, in the portrait modes, you do have the ability to adjust the f-stop. So you can go all the way down to f1.4, which is going to blur the heck out of the background. So if you do want that, you can also go all the way up to f16, which is going to basically eliminate all blur. So if you want no blur in your background, I don't know why you wouldn't want blur. It's a portrait mode, but if you don't want it, you can do that. And then swiping over, there's really nothing. And also, it will indicate where you are, just like it indicates exposure in portrait mode up here on the right, where it will say your f-stops. And again, just keep in mind, the lower you go, the more blur. The higher you go, the less blur in the background. So definitely pretty neat there. That's one of, I wish we could adjust the f-stop in just the normal photo mode, but we're not able to. If we go over here to panoramic, that's self-explanatory. There's nothing really to talk about here. And keep in mind, you will notice, what is this green dot, this orange dot up here at the top? So when we're swiping through, you'll see it sometimes switching between. Okay, so when it's green, this means that the camera and the microphone are kind of being used together. So it's going to be listening to audio and it's going to be using that camera. But when it's just orange, that just means the microphone. So the reason why you'll mostly see it green is because in camera, you're using both in this application. So definitely keep that in mind if you're wondering what the heck is going on up there, Nick. I don't know what this green dot is top of my phone. That's what's going on. So again, back to panoramic mode. You could just move continuously through here to get the perfect panoramic shot. And that wasn't a great one. That's actually pretty distorted because I don't know what kind of phone that is. Is that the iPhone mini jagged? That's a jagged looking photo. But anyway, we're gonna head up out of there, and that's essentially how you use the rear camera. Now we're gonna flip it over to the front, and I'm not gonna spend as much time here because almost everything you talked about on the rear camera is essentially the same here. In photo, you have your settings. You have your live photo settings, and you can back it out here. This is one of the differences with the front facing camera. You can back it out because there's no ultra wide, but they do give you the ability to back it out just a little bit. Now we can swipe down to get out of there. And in video, same thing. You can go ahead and switch your video settings and slow motion. And in video settings, you'll see that you can't go to 240 FPS when it comes to the front-facing camera. And what's neat about the iPhone's front-facing camera video is that you can basically match the rear. So you can go 4K 2460. You can match the front-facing footage and the rear footage. And then if we go over here to portrait, you'll see we do have those same modes over here as the rear. In addition, you can do the same thing. You can adjust that f-stop where you want it. You can also go ahead and tweak your filters, your exposure, time lapse. And over here, you can tweak the light on the front-facing portrait as well. So do keep that in mind. And you could tweak the light as well with this little feature right here. So do keep that in mind. The portrait mode is very in-depth. Sometimes it cuts things off, but it's doing a better job than prior portrait iPhones. And then if you go to panel, it just switches right back to the rear, and then you'll have to come back to the front. If you accidentally go to panel, it's always going to default you back to the rear. So you will have to flip back to the front. So there's two ways to get to the front facing camera. Either within the camera, you tap in the bottom right corner, or you can say, take a selfie. And boom, it'll take you right there. Take a front facing video and it'll bring you right to the video. And as you ask it those questions, it intelligently knows to go to time-lapse, videos, slow-mo. So there are ways around using this button if you're having a lag or something like that. Probably won't happen, but I just want to let you know of all the ways you can do that. This is a tutorial after all. Okay guys, so all of these features and settings do apply for the Mini as well. So if you did buy the Mini, keep in mind they do apply there. Now when we are doing a nighttime video, it will sense how dark it is, and you'll see this little like moon icon come up. It'll let you know it's nighttime video. Let's zoom in just a little bit so you can see the settings down here a little bit better. And you'll see down here, you'll have this auto thing. Now, sometimes it gets annoying because the iPhone will automatically just start taking night photos. So you can go down here and you could slide this over to the off position, or if you want even more exposure, you can max it out at 10 seconds. So it does a long exposure to make sure you can get a nice night photo. Now, if you don't have an iPhone 12, you want to do night photos, you can download some separate applications on the App Store that will do stuff like this. But keep in mind that night mode is pretty much on auto most of the time, and then we go ahead and we could tap out 0.5x, and yes, you can do night mode in wide angle as well. So I do want to mention that about this iPhone's camera. We'll back it out a little bit and we'll talk a little bit more about the camera itself. Okay, and the last thing I want to talk about is when you are taking a photo, play around before you start taking the photos, because this phone does not do macros really well. So if you get very close to stuff, you'll see it's just absolutely blurry. Find the distances where it focuses. I find it to be, I'm going to say about 10 inches, 8 to 10 inches away is about as far as it can go before it starts getting a little bit blurry. So do play around with the distances, the focal length, so you can see essentially where this phone does perform. But essentially the iPhone 12 does the best when you just point and you shoot from normal regular distances. Punching in, punching out, it does just fine, and essentially has no real focus issues. Again, it just gets a little blurry up close, but no real focus issues. You can bring stuff in all day, and this camera with its face detection autofocus will always lock things down. So that's about it for me. This was just a tutorial on how to use this iPhone 12's camera. This dual 12 megapixel setup is freaking amazing. You've seen in this video, you can do so much with this camera. It's really a professional tool in your pocket, and I hope that after the end of this video you know everything about this iPhone, and save this one to your watch later list. Go ahead and thumbs up if you enjoyed this video, you found it helpful, because you can come back to this video, go to a part in the video. I'll put timestamps in this video so you can go back to a part and figure out how to use that feature if you forgot about it. So definitely hope this one helped you out. If you're watching this video, you have the 12 Pro Max or the 12 Pro, you want to see more of a camera tutorial on those because that's the phone you picked up, let me know down below, because I did plan on making one with the one that has 3 cameras, which is the 12 Pro. So subscribe if you haven't already. I'll catch you all in the next episode. Nick here, and peace.